My name is Lark Whitcomb. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a quiet, sun-drenched suburb on the Gulf Coast of Florida. You know the kind of place people brag about on travel magazines. Palm trees swaying, pastel houses, kids biking to school, the smell of salt and sunscreen in the air. It looks peaceful. But peace is a lie when the rot is hiding under manicured lawns and PTA smiles. And I didn't know that until the day my daughter came home different. Her name is Aria, 8 years old. My whole world wrapped up in a pair of brown eyes and messy ponytails. She used to burst through the door laughing about clouds shaped like dinosaurs and who beat who in tag during recess. But that day, she walked in like a shadow of herself. Quiet, shoulders curled in, clutching her backpack to her chest like a shield. I froze. That wasn't my girl. "Hey, Peanut," I said gently. "Rough day?" She nodded but didn't look at me, just kept walking to her room. A cold wave slid down my spine. I followed. "Aria, baby, talk to me." She sat on her bed, twisting her fingers. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "Mommy, am I weird?" That question shattered me. Everything inside me clenched. Anger, fear, confusion. Like my heart was a fist trying not to break. "Of course not," I whispered. "Why would you ask that?" She hesitated, then burst into tears so hard her little body shook. "They call me freak. They push me. They say I have no friends. They recorded me crying and showed everyone." My vision blurred for a second. The room spun. I crouched down, holding her face in my hands. "Who? Who did this?" She shook her head violently. "I can't tell. They said if I talk, they'll make it worse." I felt something primal rise in me. Not just anger, rage wrapped in helplessness, the kind that makes your hands shake, not from fear, but from the truth that you couldn't protect your own child. I hugged her, whispering promises I suddenly wasn't sure I could keep. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked the hallway like a ghost, replaying every moment I ever told myself our neighborhood was safe. Morning sun didn't bring clarity, it brought fire. I marched into the school office with Arya's hand in mine. The walls were plastered with inspirational posters. "Be kind, every child matters." Irony should be illegal. The assistant principal, Mrs. Hines, wore pearls and a smile so tight it could cut glass. "How can we help you, Mrs. Whitcomb?" "My daughter is being bullied. Physically, emotionally, and recorded." Her smile twitched. She typed something lazily. "And do you have proof?" There are moments in life you realize people don't protect children. They protect reputation. I felt it right then. Heavy. Dirty. "She's afraid to speak because they threatened her. That's proof enough." Mrs. Hines exhaled like I was a paperwork inconvenience. "We take bullying very seriously, but without specific names." "Without names?" I leaned in. "You're saying children must endanger themselves further before you act?" She blinked. Twice. "I'm sorry, but there are policies." Right then, the office door opened and a boy strutted in. Expensive shoes, smirk carved into his face. I'd seen him before. Mason Hale, son of Terry Hale, the local real estate mogul who practically funded the school and half the community events. Arya squeezed my hand, nails digging into my skin. Her breath hitched. She didn't have to say it. I knew. Mrs. Hines stood straighter. "Good morning, Mason." He didn't even acknowledge her. Just winked at my daughter. Something in me snapped. "That's him," I hissed. "He's one of them." Mrs. Hines's posture changed from polite to steel-cold authority. "Mrs. Whitcomb, I must ask you not to make accusations without evidence. Mason is an exemplary student." Exemplary, of course. Money and influence buy halos in this town. I stared at her, stunned. The silence felt poisonous. Finally, I whispered, "If you won't protect her, I will." She gave me a practiced smile, the kind bureaucrats use when dismissing complaints they've already decided to bury. "We'll look into it." Translation, we'll do nothing. On the drive home, Arya stared out the window, silent tears streaking down her cheeks. I wanted to scream, smash something, burn the whole system down. Instead, I said softly, "I promise. I will fix this. Inside, a voice whispered, but what if you can't? What if they're too powerful? Fear sat heavy on my chest. But under the fear, a spark ignited. You don't threaten my child. You don't silence her. You don't expect me to sit and swallow it. That night, I opened my laptop, started reading school board policies, legal forums, whistleblower protections, digital harassment laws. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I was not letting this die quietly. Then a notification pinged on my phone. An unknown number. A message. Stop digging. You don't want trouble. Neither does your kid. My blood ran ice cold. They weren't just ignoring me. They were watching. And threatening us. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. And then, something clicked in my brain. Fear didn't fade. It sharpened. They thought intimidation would silence me. It had the opposite effect. Because if they wanted me quiet, that meant they were afraid. I whispered to myself, voice steady, heart turning to steel. You picked the wrong mother. And right as I said that, my phone lit up again. Another message, a video file. My stomach dropped as I tapped it. It was Aria, crying in the school bathroom, knees pulled to her chest. Someone behind the camera laughing. Then a voice in the video. Say you're nobody. Say you're nothing. Her tiny whisper, I'm nothing. The world went silent. Then everything inside me exploded. This wasn't bullying anymore. This was war. And I was going to burn their pretty little system to the ground. The morning after the video, sleep was a useless stranger. I woke like someone hit pause on my life and handed me a mission folder. I didn't know the first thing about digital forensics. I knew how to read PTA minutes and sautéed the best garlic shrimp in the neighborhood. But metadata, encryption, chain of custody, those words sounded like a different language. So I called Javier Cruz, the high school computer teacher. Javier is 40, wears the same faded chenille jacket every day, and knows more about phones and servers than the school realizes. He also has a quiet way of believing trouble can be solved with logic and coffee. Show me what you found, he said after watching the clip in my kitchen, eyes darkening. He leaned over my laptop, the soft hum of the fan suddenly sacred. He did things with a USB stick that looked like magic. Extracting file headers, reading EXIF data, tracing IP pings. Every time I blinked, a new piece of the puzzle snapped into place. This was uploaded from a burner phone, he said. And, look, the upload happened on school grounds between 2:05 and 2:10 p.m. My heart thudded. The bathroom camera footage, the hall cameras. None of it had been turned over. I remembered Mrs. Hines's cool smile, the way she'd said, "We'll look into it." Javier rubbed his jaw. "You need a chain of custody. We keep a copy, time-stamped, and get it to someone outside the school, preferably a lawyer or a journalist. If you post this online without protocol, they'll shred it in court." I felt both baited and relieved. There was a procedure, and procedures were things you could exploit. I started with the small moves. I printed copies. I emailed a cautious message to Maya Lin, a friend who freelanced for a local paper. Maya had written a human interest piece on a teacher last year and had the tenacity of a woman who collected truths for breakfast. She replied with a single line, "Meet me at the cafe by noon. Bring everything. Don't mention me to the school." I convened what I called the kitchen meeting. 3 mothers, 2 dads, an exhausted teacher, and me. I laid out video timestamps, screenshots, and Javier's notes. At first, it looked like a typical PTA gripe session. Muffled sighs, worried faces, someone asking about bake sales. Then I said one sentence that changed the room. "This is criminal, and silence helps them." A woman named Aisha, quiet, mid-30s, whose son played soccer with Aria, stood up so fast her chair scraped. Her voice was low, tight with things she'd never said out loud. "My daughter was pushed last year by Mason," she said. "We told the school. They said it was horseplay. A week later, they sent a letter urging forgiveness." More heads nodded. A father, Tom, admitted his younger boy had been threatened too. But his company relied on Terry Hale for commercial contracts, and he'd been advised to keep quiet. The room was a minor war front. I felt it. The scales tipping from private shame to public momentum. We formed a plan. Small, surgical, legal. Collect evidence, get copies outside the system, request official logs, file formal complaints, get witnesses recorded in sworn statements. Maya promised to ask her editor about an investigative piece if we could show systemic cover-up. That night, I drafted a letter to the superintendent and attached a thumb drive with the video and Javier's technical notes. I pressed send while Arya slept in the next room, breathing like a small, trusting machine. The reply from the superintendent was the sort of polite deflection that smells like paper towels over a spill. He thanked me for bringing concerns to the district and promised an internal review. Translation: do nothing. Within 48 hours, something ugly began to stir. Our private Slack group, a closed chat I created for parents, started to receive anonymous messages. At first they were simple. Check yourselves. Then escalations. Edited photos of Arya from last year with cruel captions. A fake email from a parent accusing me of stirring trouble for attention. Someone plastered conservative lawn signs claiming "Protect our children, no media." Someone else called my husband at work with a script. "Your wife is making false accusations. Be careful for your job." The attacks were surgical. Not violent, but precise in where they would hurt. Reputation, income, friendships. I felt the weight of isolation settle. My husband Eric tried to be steady. He washed dishes with a faraway look and said, "We should be careful." He meant, keep our head down. He couldn't understand that careful was the same as conceding. One night, after Arya fell asleep, I found a voicemail on my phone. Heavy breathing, a man muttering, "Last warning, Whitcomb, back off." Then clicks. Static. I started sleeping with the bedroom light on. But there were victories too. Small, desperate, honest wins. Maya published a short, unsigned column about bullying culture in well-funded schools. It didn't name anyone, but people read between the lines. A handful of parents I hadn't known before messaged me privately. My child too. One of them attached a shaky video shot from an iPhone, a boy laughing as he shoved a girl. The audio, a chorus of jeers. As our dossier grew, so did the stakes. Mrs. Hines called me in for an informal meeting, the kind that looked friendly but smelled like interrogation. She warned, "Think about the community. Think about your daughter." I thought about Arya lying awake, swallowing shame like pills. I thought about Mason's smirk in the office, those expensive shoes. The next week, I submitted a formal request to the school board for an emergency hearing. The board clerk replied with a form. Petition requires 25 signatures from registered voters in the district. I had 5. I spent 3 days collecting signatures like a canvasser at a funeral. Polite smiles, urgent stories, a few slammed doors. People were scared. The message had been sent loud and clear. Mess with the status quo, and you risk everything. On the 4th day, I had 24 signatures. That night, someone keyed Arya's name into the school bathroom mirror in black marker. Liar. My chest emptied. Arya found it before morning, makeup of shame already smoothed over by a child who wanted to be brave. I told her we would go to the hearing. I told her I was going to make the school listen. She looked at me with tired, too old eyes and whispered, "Mom, are they going to hurt us?" I promised I would protect her. But then, as I prepared the final copy of our complaint, Javier pinged me with a single line. "Check your backup drive. Now." I thumbed the external drive and my stomach dropped. The folder with the video was gone. Not corrupted, not renamed, just gone. There were traces. A log showing a remote access from an IP linked to a home in the Hale estate. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Someone had taken a step beyond intimidation. They had gone for evidence. A sound at the door. A soft, deliberate knock broke the room's thin calm. My phone buzzed at the same time. Unknown number, new message. You should stop. Tonight. 9 p.m. Pier. Come alone. My hands went ice cold. I had two choices that felt neither brave nor sane: ignore it and risk escalation, or show up and risk walking into a trap. I looked at Arya sleeping in her room, at the list of 24 names, at the empty folder. I felt something cold and flawless set in my chest like a shard of glass. Whatever I chose, the night was folding shut around us. The pier smelled like old tar and salt. Night wrapped the boardwalk in a soft, indifferent darkness. I told myself I wasn't afraid, but I packed like someone who expected to survive a minor apocalypse. A small digital voice recorder in my pocket. A backup USB tucked into the lining of my purse. A flashlight. My keys. Nothing flashy. Just a woman who refused to be easy to erase. I left a note for Eric on the kitchen table. Short, blunt. If anything happens, call Maya. Don't let them intimidate you. Love you. I didn't want him to be stuck guessing. Arya slept like a peaceful animal. I wanted to scoop her up and never leave. Instead, I drove to the pier with my heart in my throat and a fury like a coiled wire. The place was half abandoned at 9 p.m. A couple holding hands near the bait shop. A fisherman with a headlamp. The moon, a pale witness. I waited, hands in pockets, eyes fixed on the shadowed end of the pier where the light hung out of reach. A figure approached. Not the hulking silhouette I imagined, but a trim man in a dark jacket, his face shaded by a cap. He stopped a few feet away and tipped his chin. "Mrs. Whitcomb?" His voice was casual, too smooth. "Yes." I kept my voice steady. "You asked to meet." He exhaled like someone playing a game of patience. "We don't want trouble. We just want this to stop." "And you think threatening me will make it stop?" "No threats," he said quickly. "A request." I clicked the recorder on discreetly. My thumb found the tiny red light like an anchor. He leaned in, breath smelling of whiskey and cologne. "Terry Hale runs a lot of things around here. He has concerns about his son. He asked me to talk to you. Walk away. Drop the complaint. Let the school handle it quietly." My pulse tried to become a drum. Let them handle it? They covered it up. Someone uploaded a video of my daughter crying. Someone watched and laughed. The man's jaw tightened. "We can make the hurt go away, but it gets messy when people make noise. We're offering you a clean solution." A clean solution. The smell of bribery reeking like cheap perfume. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I asked, soft as a blade, "What if I don't accept your clean?" He smiled, a thin blade of a thing. "Then you'll make enemies. You'll hurt your family. You'll be the one who broke the community." He reached into his pocket and produced a business card. Cold, printed with the Hale Company logo. He set it between his fingers, then slid it toward me. I picked it up. My hand didn't shake. "You think this scares me?" I said. "You think a card and a whisper will keep me quiet?" He shrugged. "We're not monsters, Mrs. Whitcomb. We just protect what's ours. Your son recorded my child and laughed. That's not protecting. That's abuse. And enabling it is criminal." He looked at me like I'd given him a complicated problem he'd rather not solve. "People like you don't understand how communities survive. Sometimes decisions are made for the greater good." At that moment, the sound of a car door slamming echoed from the parking lot. The man looked up. A small hesitation. The world thinned. Someone else was coming down the pier, a taller figure, confident, hands in coat pockets. My skin prickled. Mason? No, not Mason, Terry Hale himself. He didn't bother with pleasantries. He came straight to me, smile surgical and animal. "Lark," he said, as if we were old acquaintances. "I admire courage. It's rare in our town." I kept my jaw tight. "You're the one who funded the cheer uniforms last season." He laughed, a short, polite sound. "Yes, I invested. I like to see the community thrive." "So you invested in silencing my child?" His smile thinned. For a second, something almost like regret flickered. Then it hardened into strategy. I had my people look into the video. It was an ugly thing. My son was involved. He made a mistake. We handled it internally. You deleted evidence, I said. You accessed school servers. He studied me, calculating. We did what we had to. We protect our own. Your son recorded Arya crying, I pressed. You let it circulate. Terry's gaze became as cold as tidewater. That's an accusation. I felt my throat close. Then why did someone access our backup drive? Why is the log pointing to an IP in your estate? Silence for a heartbeat. Then, Terry lowered his voice in a way meant to reassure and terrify at once. This isn't just about Mason. It's about avoiding scandal. Think about donors, grants, jobs. When a school's reputation tanked, everyone suffers. We acted to prevent a much worse fallout. We made choices. He looked away for a moment, like a man weighing a ledger. Then he turned back and, without theatrics, said something that felt like a personal threat disguised as advice. Walk away, Lark. File this much further, and we will not limit ourselves to words. My recorder hummed in my pocket. My hands, somehow steady, didn't reach for it. I wanted to rip his head off, but rage and reason warred. If I pounced, I'd play into their narrative of an unhinged mother. You're threatening me, I said. I'm telling you consequences, he corrected. You can choose peace. I smiled, a thin, patient thing. Peace isn't what my daughter needs. Justice is. He nodded as if conceding some minor point, then stepped back. Last time I say this in person. Walk away. As they left, Terry's man lingered a beat and said softly, You should check your house camera footage in the morning. It doesn't always tell the whole truth. My phone buzzed the second they disappeared into the night. A text from Javier. We recovered the backup. Partly. Someone scrubbed files, but a shadow remains. IP traces confirm Hale access. Also, Maya posted an anonymous op-ed citing pattern of cover-up. It's getting attention. Hope flared like a match. Then the text that followed 3 seconds later turned that spark into fear. Also, someone was in your backyard. Motion cam at 8:43 p.m. Check. The world tilted. My hands went ice cold. Someone had been there while I stood on the pier bargaining with monsters. My phone showed an image, grainy, a figure in dark clothing at the gate, reaching up toward the house light. The timestamp matched the knock, the text, the empty folder. They were inside our circle of life now. They knew our rhythms, our routes to school, our sleep schedule. Arya was safe in bed, breathing slow and trusting. Eric was asleep, unaware. And I, split between fury and the urgent crush of fear, had to choose my next move. I closed my eyes for a second and counted to 5. Then I opened them and felt something clearer than courage. A map. If they wanted us scared, they'd chosen the wrong target. Fear sharpened my focus. The firewall of our lives had a weakness. We knew where they'd stepped. I whispered into the dark, into the recorder I'd tucked into my palm and left on my kitchen counter as a backup. They moved against us. They'll keep moving. But so will I. The night answered with nothing but waves. After the pier, nothing felt small anymore. The code had been broken. They had access to our files, they knew our schedule, and they could step into our yard like strangers into someone else's living room. Fear sharpened into a plan. First rule, assume they were always one step ahead. Second rule, make them scramble. I called in favors I'd never imagined asking. Javier brought over more than tech skills. He introduced me to Ruth, a lawyer who volunteered with a nonprofit that helped parents in school discipline fights. Ruth smelled of strong coffee and purpose. She read our timeline and sighed once, the kind that meant both sympathy and calculation. You've got a pattern of suppression, she said, and we have a partial digital trail. This is litigious, but it's also dangerous if we go public without protection. Protection how? I asked. Protect the child first. File for emergency injunction to prevent the school from deleting anything. File a protective order if necessary. And we preserve metadata, timestamps, witnesses. We don't post raw video. We weaponize the narrative carefully. Weaponize. I almost laughed. The battlefield felt absurd and precise at once. Ruth helped draft our emergency petition. We demanded an immediate supervised audit of school servers, CCTV, and staff accounts. We requested preservation orders. The language was clinical and heavy with implication. Tampering, obstruction of justice, negligent endangerment. Filing the petition felt like stepping into a courtroom before we had a hearing, but we had to force the system to react. Meanwhile, Maya's anonymous op-ed had rattled the town. Comments popped like dry leaves, supportive, dismissive, belligerent. Terry Hale's men started a counter-narrative. Anonymous posts claiming our family was seeking attention. Eric's work called 2 days later asking for clarity about my involvement. His hands trembled during dinner as he explained the HR call. His prudence began to look like cowardice to me. His fear, like betrayal. We set up layered security at home, new locks, motion-activated lights, a temp alarm system that pinged my phone if anyone loitered near Arya's window. Javier installed a small mirror camera on our porch that uploaded encrypted clips to an off-site server. Ruth insisted we keep hard copies of everything. Paper never gets remotely scrubbed. We started collecting testimonies. Aisha found old texts from her daughter's teacher referencing playful roughhousing and urging discretion. Tom's son agreed to a recorded statement, mouthing the names of kids who were always present when Arya was singled out. But the more we gathered, the more resistance we faced. Some parents rescinded their statements under pressure. One by one, livelihoods and friendships were leveraged against them. A bakery owner who'd signed our petition called us from tears, explaining that Terry Hale had withdrawn a large catering contract for the school unless the owner withdrew support. People folded like wet paper. And yet, the pile of small truths grew into a file that hummed with momentum. Ruth filed the preservation order. The judge agreed to a limited emergency hearing for the week after next. If the school couldn't explain the missing backup and the access logs, the legal net tightened. That's when the twist came. I woke to a message from Javier at 6 a.m., 3 words that made coffee taste like ash. Camera compromised. Gone. My stomach dropped so fast I almost blacked out. How? I texted, fingers numb. No physical tampering. Remote wipe with admin credentials. And, Lark, look at this. He sent a screenshot. The admin user who had executed the wipe was not a generic system account. It was logged as Heinz admin, and the IP trace routed through a VPN node that bounced eventually to Hale property addresses. I stared at the name until the letters blurred. Mrs. Heinz, the assistant principal with the pearls and the smile that could cut glass, had admin-level access to the system. She could erase, alter, and reroute everything. Betrayal recalibrated. Not just a parent protecting a son. This was systemic. An educator who prioritized reputation over safety, enabling predators and protecting patrons. I called Mrs. Hines and left a recorded message asking for an explanation. Her secretary called back and suggested we speak after the school's internal review concludes. Translation: she would stonewall until the judge's gavel arrived. Ruth moved faster. She subpoenaed account logs and requested the school's IT vendor to preserve backups off-site. The legal pressure was a hammer. You could feel its weight approaching. Then there was the matter of Mason. He kept showing up places he shouldn't. At the soccer fields. Outside the library. Once, Arya nearly ran into him after school. A teacher intercepted and said Mason had permission to be there with after-school responsibilities. Permission granted by whom? The night before the hearing, at our kitchen table, Arya slipped a drawing across to me. A dark scribble of a person towering over a small figure under a bathroom stall. Her handwriting scrawled, "They make me say, I'm nothing." My hand shook as I taped it into our file. I asked Eric to take Arya to his sister's that night, for safety. He resisted at first, then agreed. But when he went to call his sister, he paused, jaw tight. My manager wants to talk, he said. They say they need reassurance that this won't affect business. Business again, the invisible weight pressing on every choice. I arranged for Arya to stay with Aisha's mother instead. Aisha insisted, blunt and fierce. Your daughter sleeps at my house, she said. I won't let them use your fear to break her. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table examining the trail. Logs, emails, the drawing. I had allies, but not enough. At 10:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a single image attached. I opened it with a hand that did not belong to me. It was a photo of Arya, asleep on Aisha's couch, her hair tangled, cheeks flushed with sleep. The timestamp, 10:05 p.m. My throat closed. How had someone taken this? No one in Aisha's house but family. Their home was private. I called Aisha immediately. She answered on the second ring, breath sharp. We locked the door, she said. We slept. How? We need to check all cameras, I said. Every door, every window. Aisha whispered, someone at my back gate last night, footsteps on the side path. My heart stuttered. The net had widened. They were no longer just watching us. They were inside our perimeters. They were finding the soft places. Friends, neighbors, the only spaces where children could be safe. I realized, with a cold clarity, that this wasn't only about forcing an audit or winning a hearing. It was about creating a fortress for my daughter in a town that didn't know how to keep promises. The judge's hearing loomed in 5 days. We had to move before then. I took a breath and typed a message to Maya. We go public tomorrow, full dossier, court records, you run it front page. Her reply came back instantly. Are you sure? This will burn everything. Alliances, donations. Are you ready? I stared at the screen. The answer was a forge-hot yes. I hit send. Then the line rang. Unknown caller. No number. A voice, soft and unmistakable, breathed into the receiver. Last chance, Mrs. Whitcomb. Drop it, or the next photo won't be of a sleeping child. The phone went dead. My hands burned. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere in the night. Inside, I felt the stakes pull taut as a wire. We were no longer moving a file through the courts. We were moving against people who would not stop. And I realized with a cold, fierce accuracy that to win, I might have to become someone I barely recognized. Sleep didn't come that night. It hovered outside the windows like a trespasser, unwelcome and watchful. I stayed at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched tea, the steam fading like warmth, leaving a body. Morning arrived without mercy. By 7:00 a.m., the house felt like a command center. Papers layered the table, affidavits, printed logs, email threads, clipped screenshots. Ruth sat across from me, glasses perched low, red pen bleeding across documents. Javier leaned over a laptop, typing with the silent fury of someone who had been violated and took it personally. I decrypted the handshake trail, Javier said without looking up. Whoever accessed that camera used a routing chain tied to school district credentials, not a kid hacker. Someone with infrastructure, someone protected, someone old enough to know better. Eric hovered in the doorway, pale and tired. He hadn't slept either, but his expression wasn't war. It was dread. Do we really need to publish everything? He asked quietly, voice trembling. Maybe there's another way. I stared at him. The man I loved, the father of my child. I saw loyalty battling fear inside him, a war I silently begged him to win. There is no other way, I said. They came to Aisha's home. They photographed our sleeping daughter. He swallowed hard. Fear won. He walked out. The front door clicked gently, the sound of retreat disguised as politeness. Ruth watched him leave, then looked at me. War breaks marriages, she said simply. It's not the war, I whispered. It's the apathy. The drop. At 9:14 a.m., we pushed the button. Maya published our dossier, Carefully redacted children's names, sanitized timestamps, court filings, IT logs, documented disappearances of school footage, and one still image, the blurred outline of the playground bathroom door. Headline: When schools silence harm, one mother fights a system rather than a bully. Within minutes, phones burned. Maya's article climbed to the front page of local news, then regional, then parent advocacy forums shared it, and suddenly our small-town saga wasn't small. Messages poured in. Dozens, then hundreds. Parents from other districts, former teachers, students who had stayed silent once, people who had suspected Hail Money was greasing more than donation drives. And then the backlash. Threats. Calls from blocked numbers. A post accusing me of fabricating abuse for attention. A Facebook group calling me mentally unstable. Cowards hiding behind keyboards, acting as defense brigades for power. And, inevitably, the school's statement. A polished, lawyer-scrubbed press release dripping with synthetic compassion. We take student safety seriously. False narratives. Ongoing internal review. Trust the integrity of our administration. Integrity, a word they strangled every time they said it. Then came the one line that turned my blood to frost. No evidence has been found to support allegations. No evidence, because they erased it. No evidence, because they controlled the vault. No evidence, because the wolf was in charge of the lock. I didn't get angry. Anger burned fast. This was colder. Steel cold. Ruth lifted her head. They just made a legal mistake. They publicly denied facts under an active preservation order. Contempt, I asked. Better. Her smile was surgical. Obstruction. Retaliation in the open. By noon, a police cruiser idled outside our street. Not for us, but watching. I didn't know whether to feel safer or hunted. Eric hadn't returned or called. Aria texted a heart emoji from Aisha's mother's living room. I played it cool for her sake, sending back, I love you. You're safe. I'm proud of you. But my hand shook. At 12:47 p.m., like the school board chair called, a voice warm like poison tea. Mrs. Whitcomb, this public escalation is unfortunate. If you withdraw, we can arrange a mediated resolution, disciplinary actions quietly, safeguards, perhaps a school transfer. There will be no quiet deal, I cut in. And my daughter is not the one who needs transferring. A pause. Thin air crackled. Then, you don't understand the forces you're provoking. Eric moved instinctively in front of me. My heart vaulted into my throat. Javier grabbed his laptop. Ruth slid her hand into her bag. Papers? Pepper spray? A brick? Hard to tell. I opened the door. A woman in a gray suit stood there, badge clipped at her belt. Federal seal. Real. Mrs. Whitcomb. I'm Agent Calhoun, Department of Education Civil Rights Division. We received multiple federal complaints today, including from a whistleblower inside your district. My breath caught. Inside the district. Someone inside defected. Agent Calhoun continued, tone calm but lethal. We're opening a Title IX and civil rights investigation. But first, she paused, lowering her voice. I need you to stay calm. They'll panic now. Panic makes powerful people sloppy and dangerous. Fear crawled up my spine like an electric current. Then she pulled a crisp folder from her bag. And Mrs. Whitcomb, whatever you do next, document everything. This is now a live federal matter. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't fighting alone anymore. And they knew it. Cliffhanger. As she turned to leave, headlights flared outside. A black SUV pulled up across the street. Dark windows, engine idling. Javier whispered, That's not federal. Agent Calhoun's jaw tightened. Stay inside. Lock your doors. The SUV didn't move. It just sat there, watching, waiting. And for the first time, the threat wasn't a message or a whisper. It had a shape, a body, a presence. And it wanted us afraid. I looked straight at the windows, at whatever or whoever lurked behind the glass, and whispered, I'm not afraid of you anymore, even if I still was. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's refusing to bow to it. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the ceiling fan and the restless quiet of our Florida suburb at 2 a.m. My mind replayed every scene in Principal Carver's office like a cursed movie. Her calm smile, the way she shoved that paper toward me, that ridiculous safety concern excuse. They wanted to scare me. They thought they could silence me. Not this time. Not anymore. I've spent too many years swallowing my voice for the sake of peace, for being a good parent, for believing systems worked if you just followed the rules. But what do you do when the rules are written to crush you? You change the game. I was done being polite. At 6 a.m. Haas and with no sleep and pure adrenaline pumping, I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. Eli walked into the kitchen rubbing his eyes, a blanket still draped around him like a cape. "Mom, you didn't sleep again?" I forced a smile. "No big deal, babe. Coffee is my superpower." He didn't laugh, just sat across from me and whispered, "Are we gonna be okay?" My heart squeezed. I reached out and held his little hands. "Yes, we're gonna be more than okay. I promise." Promises are dangerous things. They can break you if you fail. But this one I would turn into stone. By 8 a.m., I had a plan. I gathered every receipt, email, medical note, screenshot, and timestamp. I created encrypted folders, backed them up on 2 drives, and stored one in a lockbox in my closet. Then I opened the parent group chat Carver thought she had destroyed. Turns out she didn't delete it. She couldn't. She wasn't the admin. I was. I typed slowly, deliberately. "Parents, it's time. Meeting tonight. My house. 7 p.m. If you've experienced bullying, silencing, or retaliation from the school, come." I hit send. Within seconds, bubbles appeared. "We're in. Finally. Carver can't bury us all. I have videos. I'll bring documents." Every ping of my phone felt like a heartbeat, a pulse of power, a reminder. I am not alone. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. A private number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Whitcomb." Carver's voice. Smooth as glass, sharp as glass too. "We need to discuss your behavior." I almost laughed. "My behavior? You're creating unnecessary alarm. I'm advising you, as a courtesy, to step back and let the school handle things." "Handle things?" I repeated. "You mean bury them?" Her silence was brief, but icy. "I understand your emotions." "No," I cut in. "You don't, and you won't. But you'll feel the consequences soon enough." "Is that a threat?" she snapped. "No, that's a promise." Then I hung up. My hands shook. Not from fear, from power, from finally standing up. 7 p.m. came fast. Our living room filled slowly, parents arriving with nervous glances and heavy folders. Some carried tissues, some carried anger, some just carried exhaustion. They weren't just parents. They were soldiers who had been fighting alone. Tonight, they weren't alone anymore. I stood in front of them, heart pounding in my throat. "Thank you for coming. Tonight we take back our voices." A mom named Cheryl raised her hand, holding a thick envelope. "My daughter tried to hurt herself last year. The school said it was attention-seeking and refused to report it. I kept everything." A father clenched his jaw. "My son has bruises. They said he fell." Another mother. "They told me if I spoke out my kids could lose extracurriculars. Is that even legal?" No, it wasn't. None of this was. I opened a document on the TV. Parent Coalition for School Safety. Official complaint packet. Gasps filled the room. "We're filing together," I said. "Not just with the district, with the state board, the Department of Education, and if necessary, the press." It felt like electricity crackled in the air. Hope, fragile but growing. "Tonight," I continued, "we organize. Tomorrow we expose them." But then, the doorbell rang. Hard, sharp. Once, twice, 3 times. Every parent froze. My pulse spiked. I swallowed and walked to the door. Through the peephole, A police uniform. Not one, two. Mrs. Whitcomb? One officer called. We need to speak with you. Gasps behind me. A mother whispered. They already know. My stomach twisted. So they wanted to scare me. Again. I gripped the doorknob, inhaled deeply, and opened the door. Yes, officers? The taller one looked uncomfortable. We received a call from the school regarding potential harassment and coordinated disruption. We need you to come with us to clarify. Behind me, parents shifted, outraged. Cheryl muttered, "This is intimidation." The officers weren't cruel. They just looked stuck, as if even they knew this was wrong but had orders. I squared my shoulders. I'm not going anywhere without my attorney. The officer blinked. You have a lawyer? Yes, I lied smoothly. I do. And I added, loud enough for every parent to hear. Everything we say and do tonight is protected and recorded. The officers exchanged looks. Then slowly, reluctantly, they stepped back. We'll follow up, one said, and they left. I closed the door gently, turned back to the room. Parents stared at me wide-eyed, breathing hard, fearful but fired up. That, I said softly, is why we don't back down. A murmur of agreement. Tension shifted into resolve. I felt something rise inside me. Not rage, not fear, but purpose. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because now, we fight harder. And tomorrow, we strike first. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. For one terrifying second, I thought it was the police again. Or the school. Or worse, the district lawyers coming for me. But no, it was parents, dozens of them. I couldn't come last night, but I want to help. I have recordings. My kid was forced to apologize to their bully. Principal Carver threatened me, too. The quiet ones were speaking now. Silence was cracking, like glass under pressure. Eli tiptoed into the kitchen, sleepy-eyed, clutching his stuffed capybara. Kids have a way of sensing storms even when adults pretend sunshine. Mom, why are you up so early? I have work to do, baby. Work meaning war. Step 1, lawyer up. I Googled education rights attorney Florida whistleblower retaliation. I expected to find maybe 2 names. Instead, I found dozens, because apparently school retaliation cases weren't rare at all. I called the top one. A woman answered. Firm, clear voice. No nonsense. Law Office of Rachel Herrera. This is Lark Whitcomb. I need help. It came out shakier than I wanted. What's happening? She asked, tone sharpening. I told her everything. The bullying, the cover-up, the threat, the cops at my door, the group of parents banding together. When I finished, she didn't say, calm down, or, are you sure? She simply said, email me your documentation. And Lark, you're doing the right thing. This has to be brought to light. I nearly cried. Not because I was weak, but because someone finally believed me without making me feel hysterical. Step 2, the press. I didn't go small, I went nuclear. Sunrise Florida News, Orlando Sentinel, Tampa Bay Times. And then, the big one, ProPublica, investigative journalism royalty, the people who expose corruption for breakfast. I sent them a message. Parents in suburban Florida schools silenced and threatened after reporting systemic bullying. Administration retaliating, police intimidation last night. Documents attached. Attach. Send. No turning back now. By late afternoon, parents began arriving at my house again, but this time it wasn't for grief or panic. It felt like a mission command center. Laptop screens glowed, printers hummed, kids played Mario Kart in the living room while their parents prepared to dismantle corruption in the kitchen. Cheryl handed me a flash drive. I got audio. Another dad opened a binder. Timeline, every incident, names redacted except staff. Someone else whispered. My cousin works at the Department of Education. She said she can flag our complaint and push it up the chain. We were building something bigger than a complaint. We were building a movement. I looked around and realized I wasn't scared anymore. Not really. I was alive. Then came the first blowback. Around 5 p.m., my phone pinged with a school email. Subject line: Urgent. Pending suspension review for Eli Whitcomb. My stomach dropped. Heat rushed up my spine. Suspension? For what? For existing? For being my child? Eli looked up at me from across the table. I forced my expression to stay calm, but rage boiled so hot my hands shook. They weren't going after me. They were going after my kid. Cowards. Cheryl grabbed my arm. Breathe. This means they're scared. She was right. Bullies escalate when cornered. I hit forward and sent the email to Attorney Herrera. Subject: Retaliation evidence. Bro 1. She responded instantly. Do not reply to the school. I will handle. Also, congratulations. They just dug their own grave. I exhaled slowly. How beautiful it felt to not fight alone. But the universe wasn't done with surprises. At 7 p.m. when a knock sounded at the door again. Soft this time. Not police knock. Tentative. I opened it. Standing there was a woman I recognized vaguely. Sharp blazer, tired eyes, hair scraped into a bun. Hi, I'm Melissa Graham, Assistant Superintendent. I blinked. The district came to my house. She lowered her voice, glancing around nervously. May I come in, please? I hesitated, then stepped back. She walked into my living room and saw a dozen parents, stacks of documents, laptops, printed policies on the coffee table. She closed her eyes, almost like she was praying. I knew something was wrong at that school. I didn't know it was this bad. Murmurs rippled through the room. She looked straight at me. I want to help. But you need to understand. Carver has powerful friends. Good, I said softly. So do we. She smiled, tired, impressed, scared. I can't fight this alone officially, but I can point you to the right laws, the right offices, the right pressure points. I realized something breathtaking in that moment. This wasn't just a fight for Eli anymore. This was a battle for every kid who'd been ignored, dismissed, blamed, or silenced. And the school system? It was starting to crack. Melissa sat, rolled up her sleeves, and whispered, Okay, tell me everything. We talked for hours: strategy, timing, documentation, media leak windows. Parents scribbled notes like soldiers prepping for a siege. At one point, Eli climbed into my lap and fell asleep. I held him tight and whispered to him, even though he couldn't hear, You will never fight alone again, baby. Not in this world. Not while I breathe. Then came the moment that froze me cold. Melissa's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her face drained of color. We all stared. What is it? I asked. She swallowed. Hard. That. She turned her screen toward us. A message from Principal Carver sent to staff. Prepare statements. We may have a parent in a mental health crisis attempting to incite community panic. We must protect the children. Mental health crisis. They were planning to label me unstable. Weaponize stigma, destroy credibility, erase truth. They were going to institutionalize the whistleblower. A chill cut straight through me. The room fell silent. Then, very slowly, I smiled. Because fear had finally transformed into clarity. If they had to paint me crazy to stop me, it meant one thing. They were losing, and I was just getting started. The next morning, Florida's sun poured in like a spotlight. I didn't feel the warmth. I felt the weight of every parent, every child, every secret buried in that district. Melissa arrived early, laptop in hand, eyes sharp. We need to move fast, she said. Carver's people know we're organizing. Expect escalation. I nodded. I didn't need to ask. Fear had a pattern. It escalates. It hunts. It underestimates the relentless. By 8 a.m., I had a plan we called Operation Sunlight. Submit the formal complaint to the state board. Send verified documentation to federal investigators. Begin controlled leaks to local media. Just enough to expose, not enough to sabotage. Keep parents organized, protected, and prepared for backlash. Melissa helped me map the routes, the offices, the order of exposure. By 10 a.m., I had parents on conference calls, sharing timelines, recordings, and affidavits. This is bigger than any one of us, I said. It's about the system. And that was when Carver struck. I received an email with no subject line. Attachment. A single PDF. I opened it. Photos. Documents. Internal emails showing that every complaint over the past 3 years had been buried, dismissed, or reassigned. The files included Carver's signature approving every decision. I read one aloud. Keep complaints low profile. Parents complain, they get distracted. Focus on donor relations. Children's safety is secondary. I slammed the laptop shut, shouted so loud Eli's Mario Kart music paused mid-song. They lied. Every word, every promise, every policy. Melissa put a hand on my shoulder. They underestimated you. They always do, I whispered. I'm done being polite. By noon, our coalition had grown. Parents were sharing video footage of bullying, screenshots of emails, and text conversations proving intimidation. Some parents were nervous. Some parents were shaking. Some were ready to quit. I looked at them and said, "This isn't about comfort. This is about justice. And justice isn't comfortable. It's loud. It's relentless. It's truth made visible." Phones buzzed. Text messages pinged. Melissa whispered, "The Department of Education just confirmed receipt. They will send a federal investigator. Soon." The air changed. Not tense, not fearful. Electric. For the first time I saw it. The system wasn't invincible. It had cracks. And we were widening them. The threats intensify. By 3 p.m., the backlash began. Anonymous emails to parents, phone calls to their workplaces, threatening jobs, suspicious cars parked outside houses. I received a text from an unknown number. "Stop this or your child pays the price." Eli asked to stay home from school that day. I held him in my arms and whispered, "Fear isn't control. Fear is a warning, and we don't run." Melissa handed me a binder. Legal measures for protection, emergency contacts, restraining orders if necessary. I looked at the parents in the room. Some were pale, some were clenching fists. But I saw a fire in their eyes. One spark could light the whole chain. I raised my hand. Let's make them regret underestimating a united front. First public exposure. By 5 p.m., we released the first controlled story. I had typed a concise statement. Parents in suburban Florida unite to expose a systemic cover-up of bullying. Complaints have been ignored, children intimidated and whistleblowers threatened. Investigation pending. No names, no identities, just facts. Local news picked it up within hours. Calls from reporters flooded my phone. Emails from parents across Florida offering help arrived. Carver's office went into panic mode. Her emails increased. Her calls multiplied. She tried to call me directly. I ignored it. Because we weren't fighting her. We were fighting the machine. A strategic win. By evening, the federal investigator assigned to our case made contact. Agent Calhoun called. "Mrs. Whitcomb, you've done something remarkable. Your documentation is airtight. The district cannot ignore this anymore." I felt a wave of relief and fury. "Calhoun, I need guarantees for the parents and kids. Protection, safe channels." She reassured me. "We'll implement that." And Mrs. Whitcomb? "Yes. You've just become the central figure in a case that will change the district's policies forever." The weight of that statement hit me. Change. Real, systemic, measurable change. Finally, after months of helplessness, humiliation, and fear, I saw a glimmer of light. Justice wasn't a dream. It was here. Cliffhanger. The personal attack. Just as I leaned back in my chair, phone buzzing again. Another unknown number. A recording played. "You've made powerful enemies. Stop, or the consequences will reach you personally. We know your routines. We know your home. We know your family." The room went silent. Parents looked at me with fear I couldn't hide. But deep inside, a strange calm settled. I had anticipated this. I had prepared. They thought fear would stop us. But it only steeled our resolve. I looked at Melissa and whispered, "They want to make this personal. Good. We're ready." The battle had only just begun. That night, I barely slept. The warning message echoed in my mind over and over. We know your routines. We know your home. We know your family. Fear isn't something you can turn off. It's something you use. I used it. I planned. I prepped. By morning, my living room looked like a command center. Melissa sat with her laptop, mapping the media leak timeline. Parents gathered folders and digital evidence, whispering strategies. Eli played quietly in the corner, unaware his mom was building a rebellion. The plan was simple in concept but brutal in execution. Official complaints to the state and federal offices. Controlled press leaks exposing the cover-ups. Legal protection for parents and children. Build unstoppable public pressure so Carver could not hide. We had numbers, documents, video evidence, and even audio of Carver instructing staff to lie. We were untouchable. We were loud. We were unstoppable. By 11 a.m., Carver realized what was coming. Her office sent frantic emails, trying to intimidate parents. Anonymous calls, threats, and even rumors about parents' reputations started circulating. But our coalition was prepared. I looked around at the room full of parents. They weren't scared anymore. They were fierce. This is their panic, I said. They've been comfortable in silence for too long. We are their reckoning. Melissa nodded. I've never seen anything like this. They're scrambling. At 1 p.m., our first controlled leak hit the news. Parents in suburban Florida reveal systematic cover-up of bullying. Administration retaliated against whistleblowers. Federal investigation underway. Within hours, local TV stations picked it up. The story went viral online. Emails and calls from other districts came in. Parents seeking guidance. Carver's office was in chaos. Staffers whispered about Lark Whitcomb as if I were a storm cloud they could not escape. I smiled. Yes. We were shaking the machine. The personal threat becomes real. At 4 p.m., a different kind of knock came at the door. Sharp, deliberate. Eli froze mid-game. I opened it. 2 men in dark suits stood there. Not police, not federal agents. Mrs. Whitcomb? One asked, voice calm but icy. We represent private security contracted by parties interested in school administration stability. We'd like to speak privately. I blinked. What is this about? He smirked. That depends on your cooperation. We're here to protect everyone. I stared at them. Protection or intimidation? I didn't answer. Melissa leaned close. Stay calm. Document everything. I stepped aside, letting them in the living room. Every parent held their breath. You've caused a lot of trouble, the taller one said. People don't like being exposed. You could put your family at risk. I smiled coldly. You think fear stops me? I already faced the worst. Helplessness, humiliation, and silence. Fear is smaller than that. He frowned, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty in him. I turned to the parents. Document everything, every word, every visit, every message. This is part of the story, not a threat, part of the truth. The men left, not satisfied, not confident. We had survived. The turning point. By evening, Melissa and I coordinated with federal investigators. Statements were collected. Evidence was cross-checked. Every parent knew their rights, their protections, and their responsibilities. Then we received word. The first formal board hearing had been scheduled. The room erupted. The parents were ecstatic. The story was now official. We had leverage. We had a stage. And now we would speak. Eli crawled into my lap as I hugged him. You did it, Mom, he whispered. I kissed his forehead. No, baby. We did it together. Every voice here matters. The night before the hearing, I stayed up late, reviewing documents, rehearsing speeches, and preparing answers for questions. Melissa reminded me, it's not about winning an argument. It's about exposing the truth and making sure no child is silenced again. I wrote in my journal, I am no longer afraid. I am the voice of every parent who was silenced. I am the shield for every child who was ignored. Tomorrow is the first real battle. Tomorrow, we take our stand. As I drifted into a restless sleep, the phone buzzed one last time that night. A simple text. We know where you are. Stop or pay the price. Last warning. I stared at it for a long moment, and then I deleted it. Tomorrow, fear would not rule me. Tomorrow, truth would. Tomorrow, we would win. Or at least make sure the world knew the machine could not silence us any longer. Morning came fast, and my nerves tightened like steel cables. Eli had gone to school early, Melissa had prepared a binder of evidence, and parents filled the seats in the small conference room at the school board office. We weren't just showing up. We were bringing a storm. The room smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, but I barely noticed. All I could hear was my heartbeat. All I could see was the sea of worried but determined faces around me. Parents who had been silenced, dismissed, threatened, now sitting together, ready to speak truth. Carver walked in. Flawless hair, expensive suit, a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her board supporters lingered, whispering nervously. She paused, saw us, and her smile faltered for just a second. That second was enough. Melissa leaned close. They know they can't hide. Watch their reactions. The hearing began. Carver tried to dismiss our complaints immediately. She waved her hands, citing school policy and minor misunderstandings. But I wasn't intimidated. I opened my binder. I spoke clearly, slowly. Every email, every audio, every text, every child's story. My son was silenced. My child was told his complaints didn't matter because the bully's parent was influential. This is not a minor misunderstanding. This is systematic abuse and cover-up. We are here to demand accountability. The room went quiet. Even Carver faltered. Her lips twitched. One parent after another spoke. They brought evidence, witnesses, and courage. Melissa helped manage order, making sure nothing was overlooked. By mid-morning, the board members were flipping through our evidence like their lives depended on it. Then came the bombshell. A local reporter we'd leaked to had arrived, quietly taking notes. The media presence changed everything. Now the board had to treat the case seriously. Now Carver's lies had to face daylight. I felt Eli's absence like a punch in the gut. But I imagined him sitting next to me anyway. Proud, safe, unafraid. That vision fueled every word. By noon, Carver tried a new tactic: intimidation. She leaned toward the board, whispering that we were troublemakers and that our mental state should be considered. I looked at her, unfazed. Melissa leaned close. Document it. I did. Every word, every movement, every whisper. Hours passed. Parents, witnesses, and I gave testimony. We showed photos, emails, recorded messages. We painted a clear picture of the corruption. By late afternoon, even board members who seemed impartial were nodding, whispering among themselves. Then the room went still. The board chair cleared his throat. After reviewing all submitted evidence, we will convene a special session to decide on disciplinary action for the school administration. This includes Principal Carver. A cheer erupted quietly among parents. Melissa clapped softly, beaming. I exhaled, relief washing through me. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a step. A real, tangible, undeniable step. After the hearing, Carver avoided eye contact as we left. I felt no anger, only resolve. She had underestimated the parents, the children, and me. She had believed fear would silence us. She had been wrong. Outside, the sun was warm. Parents hugged, shared phone numbers, and promised to stay united. I hugged Melissa tightly. We've started something bigger than us, I said. She nodded. Yes, and it's unstoppable now. That night, I held Eli close. He didn't know everything I had done, but he felt the calm in me. I whispered, we stood up today, and tomorrow we keep going. No child will be silenced while I'm here. I knew the battle wasn't over. There would be pushback, threats, and attempts to discredit me. But for the first time in months, I slept knowing we had made real change. Cliffhanger. The shadow strikes back. At 11 p.m. in Shire, my phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Another text. You think today was a victory? You're only beginning to pay for your interference. We will be coming for you personally. Prepare. I stared at it, feeling a cold fire ignite inside me. They wanted fear. They wanted hesitation. They wanted me to step back. But I had seen their weakness in the light of the hearing. I had seen the truth on my side. I typed back simply, "Bring it, we're ready." The war had officially escalated, and I knew there was no turning back now. The night after the board hearing was the longest of my life. Every shadow in the house felt like a spy, every creak like an intruder. Eli slept peacefully, oblivious, but I didn't dare. Melissa stayed over, laptop ready, phone lines open, cameras discreetly positioned. We weren't just defending evidence anymore. We were defending our lives. At 2 a.m., the first call came. Unknown number. No voice, only heavy breathing. Melissa typed rapidly into a note. Pattern of intimidation, escalating, keep logs. I held Eli's hand and whispered, "They can threaten, but they cannot break us." By sunrise, the school and police were notified of suspicious activity near our home. Security patrols, cameras, and neighborhood watch were in place. Every precaution felt insufficient, yet it gave me a strange sense of power. We were ready for them. Mobilizing the parents. By 9 a.m., I convened the parent coalition. The stakes were higher now. Threats to families, children, and our integrity. Melissa shared updates, carefully, keeping the tone calm but urgent. Carver's allies are trying personal attacks. We are documenting. We are protected. We continue the mission. Continue. I addressed the group. This isn't just about our kids anymore. It's about making sure no child is silenced again. If fear controls us, Carver wins. If courage controls us, we win. Today, we act together, united, relentless, visible. Parents nodded, some teary, some resolute. I realized something. The fear they tried to instill had transformed into fuel. Every threat, every intimidation attempt was strengthening our resolve. The surveillance encounter. By noon, Melissa and I had spotted a suspicious car parked near Eli's school. The driver had been lingering for days. I called a parent who worked nearby. Keep your distance. Document everything. Later, as Eli was leaving school, the car followed. Melissa called me, whispering into the phone. He's tailing him. Keep calm. Don't panic. Record. I felt my pulse spike, but obeyed. Eli was oblivious, chatting about homework. I recorded discreetly from behind a wall. The tailing car left when other parents noticed and confronted the driver. We reported to the police immediately. Finally, tangible proof of Carver's indirect intimidation. Public exposure part 2. By 3 p.m., we were ready for the next wave. Public exposure. We released verified recordings of staff being instructed to cover bullying. The story hit social media and local news with undeniable evidence. Parents of Florida children exposed systematic cover-up of bullying. Threats, intimidation, and falsified records uncovered. Community demands accountability. Carver's office erupted in panic. Emails, calls, and internal memos were leaked by staff who finally wanted protection. Her allies began distancing themselves. Fear of exposure spread faster than our coalition could move. Melissa whispered, "They're falling apart. Just keep steady." I smiled. We weren't done, but the tide had begun to turn. Facing Carver directly. At 5 p.m., Carver called a private meeting, formal, through board mediation. Her tone was icy, but I could sense desperation under it. "I don't know who is feeding you information," she said, trying intimidation. "I know exactly," I replied calmly. "The truth is coming to light, and your attempts to scare families will not stop it." Her facade cracked for a moment. She realized she had lost control. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't threatening. I was calm, composed, unwavering. Melissa took notes. I looked at Carver and said, "Every child, every parent you tried to silence will have a voice now, and that voice is loud enough to reach every corner of this district." She didn't answer. Her silence was acknowledgement. The victory signal. By evening, the federal investigator called. "Mrs. Whitcomb, your documentation and parent coordination are exemplary. The district is being held accountable. Carver cannot ignore this." I felt a rush of relief, tempered by lingering caution. The threats weren't over, but we had leverage, and the law was on our side. At home, I hugged Eli, whispered, "Mommy's job is to protect you and your friends." And today, we did. Melissa smiled, exhausted but triumphant. As night fell, another unknown number appeared on my phone. I didn't flinch. I didn't panic. I typed, "We will not be intimidated. The truth will always be louder than fear." We were ready for whatever came next. The battle had escalated, but for the first time, we knew we were winning. Cliffhanger. The final showdown approaches. Reports came in that Carver was gathering allies for a desperate counterattack. Emails, calls, and private meetings suggested one last attempt to regain control. We would face her fully in the final confrontation, and nothing would be off limits. The war wasn't over, but the scale was tipping. And I knew. This was our moment to strike the final blow. The morning of the final hearing felt like the eye of a storm, air thick with expectation. Our little coalition met at dawn. Coffee, clipped nerves, backpacks zipped with documents like talismans. I looked at every parent's face. There was fatigue, yes. But there was also something else. A fierce serenity, like people who had stared down a freight train and decided to stand in front of it anyway. Melissa briefed us once more. Agent Calhoun confirmed federal presence. Ruth had subpoenaed the logs, the backups, the staff emails, and she had a judge's signature that made Carver's defenses brittle. When we walked into the packed school gym that served as the hearing room, the room hummed with cameras, murmurs, and the low, professional noise of people waiting for governance to prove itself. Carver sat rigid, lips thinned, and beside her, the first time in public, sat Mrs. Hines, both faces less than immaculate now. Terry Hale's chair was conspicuously empty. The board chair called the session to order. I stood when my name was called. Speaking in public used to make my throat close. Not today. I opened with the small voice I used when tucking Eli in, clear and relentless. I read a short list. Timestamps, IP logs, audio clips, names. I read the message Arya had whispered in the bathroom clip. "I'm nothing." I read it because the room needed to hear the cost of silence. I laid out everything Ruth had petitioned: admin-level wipes, Hines, admin signatures, payments and favors traced from Hale accounts, Carver's memos prioritizing donors over safety. I watched as faces in the room lost color, one by one. Then Ruth stood and spoke in a voice that was not theatrical, but judicial. She explained the chain of custody, the legal weight of metadata, and what obstruction of justice looked like in a school setting. The federal investigator then summarized Title IX violations, civil rights infringements, and potential criminal referrals for tampering with records and intimidation. The gym felt too small for the truth that day. Carver tried to defend herself. Her words were practiced, lit with the fire of someone who'd rehearsed self-preservation. But even practiced words slump under the weight of hard evidence. Then the people who had hidden in shadows began to step forward. A tech specialist from the district IT vendor testified about the VPN traces and admin account anomalies. A teacher, hands trembling, read a text the superintendent had sent, admitting they'd been pressured to protect the school's image. And then, a quiet staff member handed the board a sealed envelope. Inside, Meeting minutes showing direct calls between the superintendent, Terry Hale's office, and directives to manage parent narratives. When the envelope hit the table, the room inhaled like a living thing. Mrs. Hines's face finally broke. She had been a buffer. She had rewritten logs and reassigned blame. Faced with an onslaught of corroborating evidence, she asked for counsel. Carver submitted her resignation within the hour. Outside, cameras swarmed. But the best part wasn't headlines. It was Arya hugging me in the hallway, breathless and small and whole. "Mom," she whispered, voice muffled against my jacket. "Did we win?" I smelled her hair, salt and shampoo and the little soap of childhood, and I said, "We started to." Justice is a long word with many moving parts. What happened in that room was not a miracle. It was procedure meeting persistence. Within days, the district launched comprehensive reforms, an independent oversight committee, mandatory transparency policies for backups and logs, strict protocols against conflicts of interest, and a hotline run by a third party so kids could report without fear. The Department of Education opened a formal investigation that led to administrative charges against multiple staff members for obstruction and referrals to criminal investigators for those who had destroyed evidence. Terry Hale, the money man who thought influence made him untouchable, found himself named in subpoenas and media stories until his carefully curated invitations ran thin. He sued. The lawsuits made more leaks. The leaks made more scrutiny. The net tightened. The community reacted in messy human ways. Some folks recoiled, embarrassed to discover they'd been quiet. Others reached out with apologies and offers of help. We started support circles at the library where parents who had stayed silent could come, listen, and learn the language of consent and protection. Eric and I sat through hours of mediation and conversations. He said he had been scared in ways he hadn't shared, worried for livelihoods and the veneer of normalcy. I told him being brave didn't mean being reckless. It meant choosing the right fear to face. We didn't pretend we were the same couple as before. Fear had carved new grooves in us, but we rebuilt in a different shape. More honest, less performative. There were small victories, like Arya sleeping without nightmares after months, and big ones, like a state legislative hearing in Tallahassee where lawmakers used our case to tighten rules about school transparency nationally. The months that followed were a mixture of tired days and fierce, quiet joy. I learned the slowness of institutional change. It's plodding and bureaucratic, but it's durable. I learned there are more allies than you think, often hidden behind a cautious silence until someone else breaks the hush. Most of all, I learned about my own compass. I had been a woman who thought protection meant staying quiet and polite. I had been a mother who thought survival meant minimization and compromise. But protecting my child, protecting anyone's child, required a fiercer thing. Speaking truths loud enough to be inconvenient. So what's the lesson? Speak. Document. Organize. Trust the small, boring work of records and timestamps. Use the law if you must. Use community always. And when the machine tries to make you small, make noise. Months later, at a community gathering, Arya climbed onto a small stage to read a letter she'd written for a local school assembly about kindness and courage. She read it shyly, then looked at me in the front row and said, loud enough for half the hall to hear, "My mom didn't let them make me quiet. She made them listen." I cried then, not from vindication, from something cleaner, relief braided with possibility. Standing there, watching her speak, I felt the arc close and then widen. We had dismantled a machine of silence, but the work wasn't over. It never is. You don't finish protecting kids. You keep protecting them. But for that day, for that warm, messy, human day, we had rewritten the rules. I tucked Arya's hand into mine, and she squeezed, small and fierce. "Come on," she said, already planning the next story she wanted to draw. I laughed, a wet sound full of tired joy. And I said, to myself as much as to the room of people who'd stood with us. We will not be quiet again. End. Series complete. Would you like a condensed YouTube description, timestamps for parts, thumbnail text ideas, and suggested tags/hashtags for publishing this series? I can also format each part into ready-to-record narration with timing cues.